All right, so coming up, there's a new Superman movie coming out this year, 2025, this summer, directed by James Gunn. James Gunn also directed Guardians of the Galaxy 1, 2, and 3, the movies, Suicide Squad 2, and Peacemaker. Now, if you really want my opinion about his work, I don't think his movies are really all that cracked up to be, and they're honestly kind of mid at best. Like, I mean, I only saw Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2 once, and I mean, they're okay or they're passable. Well, the first one is definitely, it was alright. But even then, I think he took a writing credit from some woman or something, ironically. And then the second movie, I mean, I didn't have a strong opinion about it, but then looking back on it, I'm like, yeah, that was not a great movie, was it? No, it really wasn't. And then the third movie, I've heard good things about it, but I still have yet to watch it. So maybe I might work on that at some point. Then, of course, Suicide Squad 2 or The Suicide Squad. Never really cared much for it. I saw it once. It was a one and done type of deal for me. The first Suicide Squad by David Ayer back in like what was it, 2016 or something. Yeah, I actually liked that movie a lot more than the second one, to be honest. And I could actually take it a little bit more seriously. Where this one's just more of a comedy, and I just yeah. And story wise, even then, I just wasn't really feeling it. And I don't really watch Peacemaker. I've heard things about Peacemaker between people like it and don't like it, but I kind of I know what I'm getting myself into if I watch it. So I don't really have much care for it. So yeah, but he's capable of making like a fun movie type of thing centered around like comedy, like Scooby Doo 2 or something. But I don't really think James Gunn is really capable of running DC Studios or writing Superman. Like his body of work, in my opinion, just doesn't equate to. Oh yeah, I think this guy can definitely pull off running DC Studios and being our new Kevin Feige. Even though Kevin Feige is kind of lame himself, but we're not going to get into that right now. Or oh yeah, this guy is definitely going to be able to make a Superman movie. I don't think, or he's capable, he's competent enough to direct it. I don't know. I really don't know. And then the cracks and layers were really showing when Henry Cavill jumped shift. The costume reveal was pretty terrible. Casting and trying to like tell a younger Superman type story, which I'm just like, that's just too. That's really just to me just two steps back. They didn't have to reboot, but this isn't what this video is about. The teaser trailer that was also kind of bad. The humiliating sneak peek was just even worse. James Gunn pretty much overglazing himself in his own behind the scenes of Superman the movie. Like, yeah, and now there's this whole rumor about Superman being all Moby about online hate, which is basically a commentary on how James Gunn was canceled for over his weird pedophilia jokes that he had made years ago. And I'm like, look. I have an edgy sense of humor myself, okay? I can tolerate some jokes like that on like Family Guy or something, since that's more so like cartoonishly exaggerated and it's not to be taken as like, oh, this is supposed to be taken as a literal or this is supposed to be taken seriously or whatever. Because again, it's an exaggeration, but not in real life. Like where this is like an elevator joke for James Gunn. If somebody said that to me, I would really look at you funny and probably keep my distance away from you, bro. I'm just saying. And despite the writing on the wall, you still got people really just trying to defend this and justify it, what's going on religiously and stuff, by saying that it's based off of Silver Age, it's based off All-Star Superman, it's based off of Christopher Reeves. Who cares? It is bad. That's what it is. So I'm just saying, like, nah, man, you can't justify this. This is horrible. All right, so let me tell you my thoughts about the whole Christopher Reeves Superman thing. Now, Christopher Reeves was a good actor and a cast for Superman, but if you go back to those movies, they were not the best in the world, okay? Even in Superman 1 and 2 wouldn't even crack my top 15 favorite superhero live action movies, to be honest. And it's just, it's only historical, mainly because they just displayed that Superman can fly and him having a clean cut personality. That's really about it. And I can say that unbiasedly because I wasn't born in the 70s or the 80s. And when I was, like, I kind of saw, like, Superman Returns in theaters when I was a kid. And I'm not going to lie to you, I was kind of bored out of my mind. I was disappointed because I was really looking forward to, like, watching a Superman movie. I was like, oh my God, a Superman movie? Watched it, bored out of my mind, slept in the theater. And then pretty much the movie was forgettable, okay? Had some good acting in it, but that was not enough to entertain my elementary school mind at the time. Which that's a sequel to those, like, basically is also a sequel to those four Richard Donner movies, including Supergirl, with the same tone as the originals. And another thing too I noticed about that version of Superman is that he never actually progressed as a character, because if you really think about it, like, yeah, he never progressed or moved on. He was always stagnant or in the same place. And I kind of noticed this too when I looked at the canceled script for Superman 5, where apparently Superman still hasn't confessed to Lois. Then he dies against Brainiac, which I guess the good thing that came out of Superman 5 was that this was based off of, well, that this serves as an inspiration for that storyline, the death of Superman. But let me get back to the good stuff, though. So basically, he dies, but it's okay, though, because his soul would have been transferred into Lois, impregnate her, then she gives birth before dying, and then the child artificially ages up to be in his 20s and then becomes the new Superman. Which you can kind of tell they were kind of just making shit up at that point. Because, yeah, from like Superman 2 to Superman Returns, yeah, they made shit up. Even inside Superman Returns, where Lois still hasn't, like, she still doesn't know that Superman is actually Clark Kent, but she has a son with Superman named Jason that she thought was with her current husband, which is Perry White's nephew instead of Clark Joseph Kent. Oh, but yeah, it's comic book accurate, right? Yeah, totally comic book accurate. Those original Superman movies, come on. Even though Christopher Reeves was definitely jaded with how like they wrote Superman to the point where he just felt like he just left. But people want this routine back and wants this new modern take on the Dahmer movies. Like, did you guys forget about Superman 3 and Superman 4? I mean, I didn't hate Superman 3. I didn't really watch Superman 4 yet, but yeah, I've heard Superman 4 is, if not one of the worst superhero movies just out there, man. It is like one of the worst superhero movies out there. Superman is literally fighting a character called, what, the Nuclear Man? Come on. But anyways, let me get back on track. So, yeah, pretty much like I said, Reeves felt jaded about it, which is why he left. People want this new modern take on the Dahmer films. And honestly, it wasn't really until the Arrowverse until they actually progressed Superman's character in that version. And that was years after Christopher Reeves' death. Because, like in the Arrowverse, they actually gave him a lot more respect and stuff and actually progressed him as a character where, he's connecting with his son apparently off screen and blah, blah, blah. And he's even stronger and all that. That's crazy how the Arrowverse actually treated the Christopher Reeve Superman with a lot more respect than his own movies when you really think about it. Alright, so I wanted to talk about the unfair treatment of Zack Snyder, Henry Cavill, and DCEU in general for a little bit. Now, I say this upcoming Superman movie is for the general audience, sprinkled in with a little fan service with the inclusion of the Justice League, 11 potential supervillains, and starring Crypto, basically. Because most Nordy's perception of Superman is that he's a campy, nerdy Boy Scout who just stands up for hope, but embodying hope isn't a characterization. And for Henry Cavill, his Superman was pretty accurate, looks, personality, and to a degree writing-wise. People had a problem with the comparison to Christ, analytic questions, and Superman not being lighthearted enough, basically. But to me, either people would cherry-pick which moment the guy sexually harassed a woman, and then after that, he pretty much poured his drink on Superman or whatever, and yeah, all that stuff, and then all of a sudden he's compared to Hyperion or whatever. Look, that was before he became Superman. He was still Clark Kent, still kind of a young adult around this time anyways. Asked the man to leave. He was being an asshole and all that stuff. Yeah, so having super strength and not wasting that guy when he could have, yeah, he had to take it out on something big. So he took it out on the man's truck. Pretty messed up. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm just saying, like, come on. But whatever. And then what else? Pretty much destroying his livelihood or whatever, but still, it's just like, yeah, people, I feel like straw man that one scene. And then, let's see, pretty much Superman, yeah, bringing up that not saving his dad when he had the chance, even though he would have outed his secret identity, which was kind of the conversation that him and Jonathan had up until that point. Where, the tornado scene where Jonathan Kent died and all that stuff, a lot of people are like, oh my god, he could have saved him with his super speed and all that stuff. Even though, like, the whole conversation that they were having was that he needs to, like, be more careful of how he uses his powers in front of people, or people are going to, like, be all over him and stuff. He's going to get unwanted attention, whether it be from, like, the military, the government, people that might worship him or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what they were showing in some of those scenes and stuff, like when he saved the bus full of people and stuff, and Pete Ross's mom was like, he must be like some kind of god or something like that. Like, I saw him, like Pete said, he saw him, like he like moved the bus and everything. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So it's just like, yeah. So that's kind of what they were trying to demonstrate, and it was a really good scene and stuff, you know. But anyways, but instead of like with the tornado scene, instead of him just dying from a heart attack like he does in the other movies and stuff, which Jonathan Kent doesn't really die of a heart attack until a little bit later into Superman's career, if in post crisis, if I'm not mistaken. But instead of him just dying of a heart attack because Superman was helpless to kind of stop, something as simple as that, it's more of a noble sacrifice to kind of protect his son. Although I would have loved to kind of see, I would have actually loved to see Jonathan Kent at least survive long enough to kind of, watch his son grow up and become Superman. But still, here it's definitely treated like a noble sacrifice where he wanted to protect his son the best way he knew how. And that's definitely something in the comics that even Jonathan Kent, like him and Ma Kent, they would definitely go, like, yeah, they would definitely do whatever they could, whatever it takes to protect Clark's secret identity, even though, yeah, I know. And, yeah. But yeah, and then another thing too that people complain about is also the snapping the Zod's neck scene, even though there was really no other way that he could have stopped him because they destroyed the Phantom Zone thing, and they didn't have any kind of technology that can contain Zod because you saw what they were doing to that city. So it's not like what was Superman going to do with him after the fact. And plus, I mean, it's just kind of weird how people like really use that as an example when we've seen heroes, even Batman in some of these movies or in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where some of these characters have actually killed some of their villains and stuff. You know what I mean? And that's not really comic book accurate because some of these characters, they spared their villains, but locked them up or whatever, throw them in jail, whatever. But you know what I mean? But some of these characters, yeah. But in some of these movies and stuff, they want to one off these characters by the end. So, or off these characters at the end and stuff, so they won't have really much of a chance to come back for the sequels. So, I'm like, okay, so why are people complaining about General Zod then, and Superman snapping his neck, you know? So it's just a whole thing. And again, for some of these like reviewers and stuff who are like in the geeks and gamers circle or thinking critical, and look, I got nothing but respect for those guys because I listen to them on a daily basis, but those guys are like literally in their 40s to 50s. So of course they're going to say that Christopher Reeve's Superman is better because they're just a lot more attached to that than the modern stuff. Not to mention how Snyder kind of denounced them on behalf of like WB Studios, which yeah, that was kind of shitty, but it was a long time ago. I get it, but ever since it's always been nothing but like on-site review bomb, and then just stuff out of spite. Like, come on. Like, and you can definitely tell whenever they do talk about Zack Snyder because they're always like, "Oh, Zack Snyder, his movies suck. Oh my god, I couldn't stand it. Well, I guess I liked a little bit of that, but I didn't actually like. You know what I mean? That's kind of when you notice like in some of their recent videos, they kind of do act like that. But anyways, but people also kind of say that he doesn't like know comics, but don't know that like the era of Zack Snyder had grew up in, which was actually the Frank Miller era, where he kind of explored like different perspectives of heroes from the tradition, which was like kind of growing a little bit saturated at the time, to kind of just breaking some of those traditions. Now I know Frank Miller can be a bit of an overrated writer, but he did kind of inspire a lot of like filmmakers, comic book writers, and animators, namely Gendy Taskarowski, the guy who created Dexter's Lab, Primal, and Samurai Jack, where Samurai Jack also had plenty of good homages to Frank Miller's work, like Ronin and 300 and all that stuff. Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, who created the TMNT, which is based off of Frank Miller's Daredevil run, or Zack Snyder himself, who had adapted BVS, Batman vs Superman, which is based off of Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns or 300. And you can say what you want about BVS, but I'd rather kind of watch that movie more so than most of the Marvel movies from like Phase 2 going forward. Like, I mean, I'm just being honest because I'm like I know a lot of people give Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice a lot of flag, but be honest, Batman vs Superman is kind of better than most of the Phase 2 MCU movies going forward. Okay, Phase 1, pretty solid lineup. You got Captain America: First Avenger, especially Iron Man. That's a damn near perfect movie. Of course, the Avengers as well. But I mean, like, compared to like what Thor: Dark World, we're gonna say that's better than Batman vs Superman. Iron Man 2 and 3, which I know Iron Man 2 is Phase 1, but still, was Iron Man 2 and 3 better than BVS and Man of Steel? Was Captain America: Winter Soldier, which I mean, that's actually up for debate. I mean, yeah, because a lot of people do love that movie, but still, was Avengers: Age of Ultron better than Man of Steel and BVS? I'm just saying. I'm just asking. Or was hell Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame, was that even better than Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman? Because I've only watched Infinity War like twice, and I've only seen like Avengers Endgame like once, and ever since I haven't really picked it back up because it was just like, yeah, it was just, I don't know, it was just really something, kind of just a boring movie where they just sat around, did nothing, went time traveling or whatever, and by that end, the fight was really with the saving grace. But compared to like Batman vs Superman, where there was a little bit more nuance to it, and people weren't just sitting around getting fat playing Fortnite. I mean, that was definitely more of a better movie than that. I'm just saying. But anyways, and despite the studio kind of interference in the story, a lot of writers and artists like Dan Jurgens were kind of really proud by how like well shot and how their panels were kind of just brought to life inside like the movie and stuff. Yeah, it might have been a little bit of a mess with some of the Doomsday stuff or whatever, or throwing in Wonder Woman and all that. I get it because they're trying to set up Justice League so they can kind of compete with Marvel. That's not on Zack Snyder. A lot of people throw that on Zack Snyder, even though he didn't even write the stories. He just directed and followed the guidelines that WB had provided for him. But that's all. But still, I mean, yeah, a lot of the people were really proud of some of the shots and stuff like the death of Superman and everything kind of being brought to the big screen. And to be honest, Man of Steel is definitely the best Superman movie till this very day, even counting animated movies as well. Unless you can kind of prove me wrong. I mean, no, really, I dare you. Like, anyone to convince me that Superman 1, 2, 3, 4, and Superman Returns are better than Man of Steel. Or show me an animated Superman movie that's better than Man of Steel. I'm just saying. I mean, there might be something. I mean, I'm not counting Superman and Batman Public Enemies or Superman and Batman Apocalypse, even though, yeah, I would definitely say those are better movies than Man of Steel and BVS. Although, I mean, I enjoy all those movies, but I'm just saying. But show me an animated Superman movie or a regular Superman movie that's better than Man of Steel. I'm just saying. I mean, you could probably say, well, maybe All-Star Superman, I guess, or Superman the Elite, but, I mean, come on. I'm just being honest. Like, come on. So, but that's just me, though. I just find Man of Steel and just Batman vs Superman just to be a lot more watchable because I just think that, you might be just lying to yourself otherwise if you really think Superman 1, 2, 3, and 4 are more entertaining or better written movies than the ones that I just mentioned. And this notion of dumbing things down to kind of like, for kids' sake is kind of just, it just doesn't help because I kind of watched Batman Begins when I was like 6, which to this very day, Batman Begins is one of my favorite Batman movies of all time, like at least for live action. And I saw Superman Returns the year later, and Superman Returns is to this very day one of the most boringest movies I've ever seen, probably in my entire life, if I'm going to be honest, where Superman, who has all this power, and there's no real final villain like that. I understand it's Lex Luthor, sort of, and this whole Kryptonite Island stuff. Very boring movie, okay? The only exciting thing about that movie was really that bank scene that was in the trailer, or that scene where he like got shot in the eye and all that stuff or whatever. Yeah, and then we saw that. Yeah, that was the only good scene really like that inside Superman Returns. Other than that, not a good movie, and honestly, a pretty forgettable movie at that. And I saw Man of Steel when I was like 14, and it was like probably one of the most badass movies of that year and stuff, especially because of that, Superman and General Zod fight. Like, come on. So that's all I gotta say there. All right, so let me get back to the James Gunn stuff. Now, the sneak peek wasn't great, like at all. Like, it's not funny watching Superman getting emasculated by his own dog for a few minutes and then cry about how the sunlight healing him and all that stuff. Not when automatically he should have a healing factor anyways, because, when you have superhuman abilities like super strength and super speed, pretty much logically you heal faster than the average person. I mean, Flash has this where his super speed allows him to heal faster than the average human and stuff like that. Most superhuman level like characters, hell, Spider-Man is able to heal faster. He has a healing factor and stuff. It's not really on a crazy, ridiculous level, but if he has like a broken arm and stuff, it'll probably take like a few days or something to heal. So why is Superman here all beat up and broken, like beat up, bloodied, and all that stuff as badly as he was, where Crypto had to like drag him instead of just, hoisting him up? But whatever. But dragging him all the way to the Fortress of Solitude, where he has to be tended to by these goofy looking robots and stuff, and then they had to put a giant magnifying glass on Superman, or whatever in the sun thing, and be like, oh yeah, it's the sun, the Sahara, and all that, and then Superman's crying over sunlight and stuff. It's like, like, first off, the heat. Superman has solar radiation absorption, so he should be able to absorb solar radiation better than any kind of human being. Because a little science 101, us human beings, when it comes to sunlight, we actually heal, or to a degree, age a little bit faster because of the sun, right? Because of sunlight. So, pretty much, if you're like walking and stuff out in the sun, and you have, like, let's say a cut or some kind of open wound and stuff, the sun will actually be able to heal your wounds and stuff a little bit more faster compared to it being covered up. Well, a cast is a little bit different, but you know what I mean. Compared to it being like, covered up or something, or in the dark, basically. A little bit of science. All right, and it's the same thing with Superman too, but obviously on a major level though. Like, imagine like Kotal Khan, right? If you guys play like Mortal Kombat X or Mortal Kombat 11, Kotal Khan has the ability to control the sun. And when he does his ability, like, Kotal Khan can use the sunlight to heal his wounds and stuff and regenerate his health bar, right? But if like the opponent or whatever steps into like the sunlight, then he can just make the sunlight just burn you, basically, right? That's how that works. So it doesn't make sense for this whole solar radiation thing or whatever to be hurting Superman, or his bones are being reset over. No, it should be happening naturally. Like, that doesn't make any sense, So it just shows you that these guys don't really understand Superman's abilities like that. And on top of that, they're like, well, it's like the Sahara, the heat, and all that. Superman has superhuman invulnerability. Now, I know for maybe some characters, or whatever, it's a different case. But Superman, the temperature shouldn't really be affecting him like that, because obviously he's out in the Fortress of Solitude in the Antarctic, where the cold really doesn't bother him that much. So, yeah, that's an example right there. Fire, I have rarely ever seen Superman ever burnt by fire. The only times I can imagine fire burning Superman will probably be like magic related, or if it's like hellfire or something. But even then, hellfire, like from Etrigan or from Darkseid's little hellfire pits on Apocalypse, the fiery pits of Apocalypse, those can really take out Superman because it attacks his soul, but it won't physically burn Superman though. It's as shown back in some of the old 80s to 90s comics. So I'm just going to put that out there. But anyways, much like the Hulk, we kind of associate Superman with strength and masculinity. So it's not really cool or quirky seeing them displayed as weak and pathetic either. I mean, and the MCU has definitely been doing this with Hulk too, where we know Hulk is like a really badass character. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the Hulk like that anymore, but I'm just saying, like, Hulk, very strong, masculine character. When you think of the Hulk, you rarely, you're always comparing him to, like, I don't know, Broly, Doomsday or something. Like, this guy is a tank. He is undefeatable. Not too many characters you can really think of, unless they're really something, that can take out Hulk. But ever since that whole Thanos thing, when Thanos beat up Hulk and stuff to kind of establish his dominance in the MCU, now everybody's kind of looking at Hulk differently. Like, so anyone could beat up Hulk and stuff. Like, Iron Man could probably take Hulk. Thor, well, although, Thor has stalemated Hulk, but still, Thor can take out Hulk. Captain America with Mjolnir can take out Hulk. Who else can take out Hulk? Because they put up a better fight against Thanos, or any other character from What If that beat up Thanos apparently can beat the Hulk. Like, what? You know what I mean? So it's just like, and then this whole Smart Hulk, which is supposed to be Professor Hulk, but whatever. The Smart Hulk thing doesn't help either because he's kind of a little bit, soft looking himself. So it's like, but we associate these characters with masculinity and with like strength, and it's like not cool to kind of to represent them as being weak and pathetic. It doesn't get us invested in the character, and this is that same mistake that Maivich Superman had made, where in that version Superman rarely ever throws a punch, or pretty much he tries to talk down his opponent, even though clearly these people come with bad intentions. I'm like, nigga, if you don't take these people out, like, come on. Or that John Kent run with Tom Taylor, where he was like, I wanted to make my LGBT Superman, and he's never thrown a punch before. Why? What do you mean he's never thrown a punch? Like, what makes you think? What makes you think I want to read the comics now if he doesn't actually do any action in Action Comics, of all things? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So yeah, but yeah, it's just not really cool to kind of display, oh, the character is soft spoken and submissive when push comes to shove. No, I want to see the character doing some badass things and kicking ass and taking names. Even with Creature Commandos, like in the writing and stuff, there was kind of just some points where I was kind of just wondering, did a female actually write this or something? Because some of these scenes with like the Sons of Themyscira being a bunch of beta simps and incels or something, I'm just like, that's not really funny, and it's not really a good display of, like, again, masculinity or anything. It's kind of just, a deconstruction, or not even a deconstruction, but like just being like, oh yeah, masculinity and all that stuff. It's just toxic. What? But yeah, but not to mention the first depiction of Superman as well inside Creature Commandos, which, again, the start of James Gunn's new universe, where he's shown to be crucified. Him and the high level heroes, by the way, are being crucified and all that stuff, and they're all taken down by that princess who defeated them due to reasons unknown. So you mean to tell me that she managed to defeat Superman, Batman, some of the Justice League members, and the Teen Titans and conquer the world, even though Superman has dealt with worse on a daily basis, like Brainiac, Darkseid, Lex Luthor, smarter characters and characters with better resources than this princess character, but a C-list superhero, anti-hero team manages to take her down just like that. So I don't know. I don't know. Like, there was a lot of stuff that just didn't make any sense. Or in Peacemaker and stuff. I didn't really watch Peacemaker, but I'm aware that there was like a major world, like, threatening type villain or something like that in, like, what, season 1, and basically Peacemaker defeated it alongside his team or something like that before the Justice League can make it, and then the Justice League show up at the last minute, and then Peacemaker curses them out or whatever, and yeah, it was just dumb. And I'm like, so Peacemaker beat them to the final villain, even though the Justice League has two of the fastest men on the entire planet, which is Superman and Flash, but they couldn't make it in time? Okay. So, again, kind of a display how James Gunn, how he feels about high-level superheroes like Superman and stuff, and how he likes to write them and stuff. But people still really have this faith that, oh, he can still come through. He can still come through. I mean, if you say so, but yeah. So basically, there's a subplot where Lex Luthor orchestrates some artificial online hate against Superman using mutant monkeys. Yep, you heard right. At the keyboards to do so. And this seems proven by Nerdrotic Den of Nerds and somewhat confirmed by test screeners as well. And being 2025, I wouldn't really put it past writers to purposely do that kind of thing, to kind of antagonize or bash fans or whatever, or be like, well, gotcha, They do the exact same thing with Matt Reeves' Batman, where I completely forgot, but the Riddler definitely coerced his, like, goons from, like, a chat room or something. Or if you really want to go outside of, like, DC stuff, I mean, and stick with Warner Brothers, I mean, shit. They did this same thing too with Velma when they were advertising or doing that commercial and stuff, where they knew that fans were going to be upset with the race swap, but they still went with it anyways. And Velma was like, well, I know, well, basically it was an allegory, but she was like, well, I know Judy is boy craze, and how the new show isn't going to make her boy craze or something like that or whatever. It's obviously a correlation to, oh, well, I'm going to be not white, so, and I'm going to be overweight, and all that stuff, and all, just, but let's not talk about Velma. Let's not open up old wounds. But yeah, now we have this Superman movie here where basically Superman is canceled, just like James Gunn was, over his weird pedophilia tweets or whatever, via hashtag super shit. And personally, I have a problem narratively with that, because the movie is for a general audience. So I'm actually going to play that card. But anyways, meaning kids are going to, like, definitely see it, right? And while I don't mind, like, some light cursing in some of these kind of movies and stuff, I'm not really a huge fan of how it's going to be reiterated over and over in this movie and stuff, because obviously kids are going to come and watch it. So I'm like, look, like I said, I don't mind a little bit of light cursing here and there. Kids can obviously handle that kind of thing. But what I'm trying to say is, like, basically, like, obviously they're going to probably say this type of thing inside schools, like inside schools and all that stuff, right? And might get in trouble, who knows, or whatever. And it's just dumb. Like, why? Like, why? You know what I mean? So I'm just like, yeah. So that's just how I feel in that. But again, why did DC Studios give him like a high position and stuff, and not put any kind of mandates on James Gunn? I'll never know. Then people act like James Gunn is like a comic book expert for like knowing about niche superhero themed characters, even though John Cena himself was kind of told by James Gunn to just ignore the comics and he just wanted to do his own thing. Remember the news that when he went on that podcast and was like, "Yeah, so I was prepared to like read all the Peacemaker comics as much as I could to kind of get into the character, but James Gunn just told me not to read them and stuff." And I was like, he's basically just a douchey Captain America, and I'm just trying to do my own thing. And he did his own thing, and it was like weird. I mean, I understand people like it because they don't know about Peacemaker like that. I mean, hell, I don't even know about Peacemaker like that. But I'm just saying, like, yeah. So what made people think that he was going to get Superman right of all things, without making a lot of fundamental changes and stuff, or making, let's say, some colorful and creative kind of changes. Like, I just don't get it. Especially when he's openly shit-talked Superman and high-level characters before, and he was like, well, I have no interest of working on Superman in the future or whatever, or you know what I mean? And it's just like that Ta-Nehisi Coates thing, or my bad, not Ta-Nehisi Coates, Taika Waititi. I get those names mixed up. My bad. It's like Taika Waititi, where he was talking about like, oh, he directed the 2 Thor movies somehow, but then he hates Thor as a character, and he's never like, and he can barely get through a Thor comic. Excuse me, what? So why are you directing a movie about Thor? Well, because I needed the money and blah blah blah. Oh, okay, so it's just a convenience, right? But you have no respect for the fans or try to, and you're just going to do your own thing. So this is what I'm trying to point out is like this is the problem with superhero movies, and for the people that are shilling this type of thing, being like, oh no, let James Gunn cook, let James Gunn do what he's going to do with Superman and some of these characters. No, that's the problem, because he's going to put some weird ass jokes in it that we don't really have a care for, which is the problem with Marvel, where they keep making the characters into asses and jokes out of themselves. Like, hello. To me, now they're making Superman too campy like the Christopher Reeves or My Adventures Superman counterparts, where he's dorky, goofy, or whatever, treated disrespectfully. It just doesn't work. Or making him into some unnecessarily like edgelord or whatever, kind of like Injustice or New 52, where he's an asshole. Lois Lane gets butchered, and Wonder Woman gets watered down to being his toxic girlfriend, which is why they had to kind of retool post-Crisis Superman into Rebirth, because the people, like the fans, really love that version's like history and like character progression a lot more. So this is my take on what I think about James Gunn's Superman, or James Gunn's Superman, since I've been like kind of keeping up with the conversation, and with the writing on the wall, this won't be better than Man of Steel in any shape or form. And people still give Snyder, Cavill, and Man of Steel the disrespect on both sides of the aisle, manipulating Henry twice, then kicking him to the curb, which I'm kind of glad that he's not really like they're not using him, because they would have definitely like butchered him. And I'm glad he has the integrity to just say, nah, I'm not doing this shit, because yeah. And on top of that, they tried to replace him too with Sasha Calle when they were trying to like be like, oh, well, we want to do a DCU kind of thing, so we're gonna have Sasha Calle's Supergirl, and we're gonna have that one black Colombiana chick that was playing as Barbara Gordon or whatever as Batgirl. Yeah, they're gonna be the new Trinity, taking over Superman and Batman's place alongside with Wonder Woman. What? But okay, yeah. But yeah, or firing Snyder after his daughter's suicide, and then pandering to like a niche demographic, calling his fans cultists, when honestly James Gunn's fans are kind of giving him way too much more credit than he really deserves, and they kind of seem a lot more brainwashed than, well, the Snyder fans, to be honest. Or James Gunn trolling fans, destroying Cavill's costume for shits and giggles, self-inserting his problems and fetishes once again on full display for the world to see. If you have any hope in this movie, and it's like, kind of your cup of tea, then do you. But I'm only watching this movie and Fantastic Four just to see what kind of like train wrecks that they are, honestly, because I have no faith in these movies whatsoever. And it's like that line in Thanos, live with your, and where did that bring you? Back to me. Since, I mean, both Marvel and DC have a disdain for their founding heroes or Golden Age characters, but now they have to resort to cheap tactics to kind of, become on top again by going back to those characters, like the Fantastic Four. They've They've downplayed and undermined the Fantastic Four for years until now. Same thing with Superman and stuff, with DC. And before I go in, I really have one more thing to say. It's actually a quote. The one more thing I have to say is I actually have a quote from a YouTube, not even a YouTuber, but just a YouTube account named Alex Kim from the comment section of Flashback FMs, which is of Kal-El versus General Zod. So I'm going to start the quote. A lot of people are focused on what they think Superman should be, and they ignore what the neck snapping scene was actually supposed to mean. The entire movie was set up to telling how this alien is rejected at every moment of his life and feels like he doesn't belong, no matter how hard he tries to help people. Then, when he actually finds his own people, he's forced to choose between them or the humans, who have done nothing but push him around. Miraculously, he chooses to protect the humans, but at the cost of the Kryptonians' lives. With all the Kryptonians sucked up into the Phantom Zone, Zod is literally the last one of his own kind. And yet again, Superman chooses to protect the humans. The neck snapping is jarring, and it's easy for us to judge Kal based on the preconceptions of what Superman is supposed to be. But if you just take the scene at face value, solely in the context of the movie, you can see why this scene was tragic. Superman screaming, "Don't do this! Stop! Stop!" is not a forceful command. He's pleading with Zod to stop because the last thing Kal-El wants is to kill the only other Kryptonian. People criticize the scream at the end, too, for being overdramatic, but if you look at it this way, that scream makes perfect sense. He had to kill the last of his own kind for people who never loved him, all because of what? Morality? That's a tough pill to swallow, even for someone who is bulletproof and can fly.